We know some people want our ideas to seem impossible. Ideas like a fairer tax system or reining in the gas industry or transparency in politics. And yet time and time again, the Australia Institute has succeeded in making politically impossible ideas seem inevitable. But we can't do it alone. If you love Follow the Money, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution in our end of financial year appeal. Even better, thanks to 4 generous donors, every dollar donated until June 30 will be matched, dollar for dollar, until we reach our goal. So you'll double your impact if you make a donation at australiainstitute.org.au today. I hope you enjoyed today's show.
It employs virtually no one and gets the gas for free and pays virtually no tax. So their power is based on spin. If governments kind of realise that, I think it can actually be a really popular thing for them to do, to be seen to be standing up to big foreign-owned oil and gas companies.
One for mum, one for dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. The Treasurer knows.
I want an economy that works for people, not the other way around.
We'll just end up being a third-rate economy, a banana republic.
Just follow the money.
G'day, and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast that explains economics, politics and policy in plain English. I'm your host, Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Australia Institute. And it's a pretty good time to be a gas executive in Australia. Rising demand as the world emerged from the COVID-19 lockdowns, coupled with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, led to massive windfall profits for the gas industry.
Prime Minister has laid out his ambitious plan for a gas-led recovery out of the COVID-19 recession.
Get more gas, more often and more reliable.
The cost of living crisis is set to deepen for Australian households with another hit to gas prices.
We need more supply to make sure we can meet the demand.
We need more gas coming into the system, and we've been very clear on that.
He warns that energy prices next year will climb around 35% if things don't change.
Families are being urged to shop around.
They're making windfall profits, and these gas companies are taking Australia for a ride.
But according to new Australia Institute research, the gas industry isn't paying its fair share. Shockingly, it isn't even paying royalties on most of the gas we export overseas. That's royalty money the government hasn't collected that could have gone to schools, hospitals, roads, you name it, that is instead in the hands of multinational gas companies and their shareholders. Joining me today to talk about our latest research, The Great Gas Giveaway, is co-author of the report, Australia Institute Principal Advisor, Mark Ogue. G'day, Mark.
Hi, Ebony.
Mark, let's start off with the report itself. Why did you call it the Great Gas Giveaway, and what were the results that you discovered?
Yeah, we called it Australia's Great Gas Giveaway because unbelievably, as you said, more than half the gas that's exported from Australia is actually given to these big multinational gas companies for free by the Australian government because it doesn't charge royalties. And that includes about 3/4 of the gas exported from Western Australia.
So over half.
Over half.
No royalties
yes.
whatsoever.
Correct.
And over 3/4 or almost 3/4 of WA's gas?
Around 73% of the gas exported from Western Australia has no royalties paid on it because it's given away, which means it's effectively given away for free. And if you like, I can just explain how that happens.
Yeah, please do.
So gas that's exported from Australia is a natural resource that belongs to the Australian community. It's enormously valuable. And Australian governments are meant to manage that resource on our behalf. And one of the things they can do when they're managing that resource is sell it. And the gas, most of the gas exported from Australia is from under the seabed offshore. So it's those big gas rigs that you see off the coast of Western Australia and the Northern Territory. And those gas rigs, where the gas is drilled, are in Commonwealth waters. So the Australian government manages those resources and they're selling it on our behalf. Well, they're meant to be selling it on our behalf, but what they're doing is actually giving it away to foreign-owned multinational companies for free and not charging them for it. As unbelievable as that sounds, that's actually what's happening.
It is just incredible because, I mean, I'm no mining engineer here, Mark, but once we've dug up the gas and piped it or, for export, that's it. It's gone. You can't dig it up twice.
You may be no mining engineer, Ebony, but you have an insight that doesn't seem to have gotten through to the people in government that are managing our resources. You can only do it once and they're giving it away.
Yeah. Mark, you were in Canberra to launch this report with Senator David Pocock and Independent MP Monique Ryan, and they had some pretty choice words to say about the gas industry.
What we're seeing with our gas is state-sanctioned daylight robbery.
We are asking the government to tax our fossil fuels appropriately and to get that money and to use it for good rather than allowing multinationals to take it overseas.
We're seeing a betrayal of Australians and our future by the major parties. We're seeing state capture by the gas industry. They are absolute leeches on this country, and this has to end.
Are they right?
Well, it's hard to disagree with that description, because what we've got here is a handful of multinational oil and gas giants, companies like Chevron, Exxon, Shell, Impex, all of these companies. They're almost entirely foreign owned. They have built these enormous gas export facilities in Australia, and they're exporting vast quantities of our gas offshore and selling it overseas every year, enormous quantities, about 4 times as much as we use in Australia. And they're getting the gas for free. None of them pay any petroleum resource rent tax, and often they pay no company tax. For example, in 2020 to 2021, if you paid more than $30 in company tax, you paid more than Woodside, Chevron, Exxon, Shell, Impex and APLNG combined.
So pretty safe bet that literally everyone or almost everyone listening to this has paid more than all those multinational gas companies.
In that year. Some years they pay tax, like in the last couple of years, because we've had record windfall profits because of the Ukrainian war basically and spiralling gas prices. They've made vast windfall profits and they probably have paid some tax. We don't have the corporate tax data yet to check it, but I would say they're probably paying more tax. But I should just also say, with the record gas prices, they've also been price gouging Australian customers for our own resources. And that's amazing because when you think about it, because we don't import any gas. So why are we subject to global gas prices? We shouldn't be subject to them at all because we don't import it. We should be entirely self-sufficient. But because these companies control our gas resources, they're able to charge us pretty much what they like. So they've not only been making windfall profits on the global gas market, they've been making windfall profits from Australian customers for our own gas.
So that must be a key part of why prices have gone up for energy, Mark. And at one point, we even had to see the regulator, I believe, intervene to put a cap on gas prices. So you're absolutely right there about how this is impacting on consumers. But just going back to exports, because a lot of this is about gas exports, and we do, correct me if I'm wrong, export most of our gas. Like, what kinds of figures are we talking about here from this report in terms of how much these gas companies were bringing in or making compared to, attracting zero royalties for Australian taxpayers?
Yeah, so these big LNG exporters export around 80% of the gas produced in Australia, and that includes about 90% of gas produced in Western Australia. Over the last 4 years, they sold that gas for hundreds of billions of dollars, and the gas that they sold that had no royalties attached to it, because some gas has royalties attached from Queensland, onshore gas in Queensland, they do pay royalties, but the gas that had no royalties attached to it, they sold that gas for $149 billion.
So they made $149 billion and they're not paying royalties on most of that.
Correct. They sold the liquefied natural gas, they converted it to liquefied natural gas and sold that liquefied natural gas for $149 billion, gas that they got for free.
And do you have an estimate of how much additional revenue Australia could have made from those 4 years that you examined in the report?
If we just applied the royalty level that is applied to gas that is subject to royalties in Australia, it would have been around $13 billion. But that's a pretty low bar because other countries charge far higher royalties and taxes on their gas exports.
Yeah, and I think you've talked about that in the past, and in the report you kind of compare Australia to another major gas exporter, Qatar. I mean, how does Qatar do it?
Qatar produces more oil than Australia and about the same amount of gas. So it's a slightly different comparison. But basically, if you just take the oil and gas as energy content and you compare the energy that they're exporting with oil and gas, they export about double the amount of energy in oil and gas as Australia, but they get about 6 times the amount of revenue in return. So they get vastly more than Australia for their petroleum exports.
So just for people who maybe aren't as across this issue as yourself, Mark, can you just briefly explain the differences between royalties and a tax on profits? Because we often hear from gas companies and the gas lobby that they're huge taxpayers and they're the backbone of the economy and all this kind of rubbish. But there is a difference between royalties and a tax on profits, isn't there?
Yeah, royalties are completely different from a tax on profits. So a profits tax is, well, as you say, it's on profit and income. So just like we all pay income tax and companies pay company tax, which is levied on their taxable income, which is basically their profits, the oil and gas industry, should be doing the same as with any other business in Australia. But royalties are not a tax, they're a payment for the raw materials. So just like a building company buys building materials to build a building, carry out their business, they don't count that as their tax. They don't say, we bought all these bricks, look how much tax we're paying, because it's the thing there. It's just the inputs they're buying to build the buildings. Well, the gas is the same thing for the gas export industry, but because the Australian community owns the resource and they should be paying the Australian government on our behalf so that we get a return for our resource, they kind of often refer to it as a tax, but it's not. The thing to remember is that these companies should pay for the gas that they use and sell and export, and they should also pay tax. It's not either or.
Yeah, because one is for the raw materials and the other is, just the exact same tax arrangement as every other company in Australia, essentially.
Exactly. Well, there is one additional tax that they should pay, which is the petroleum resource rent tax, which is a resource tax that's meant to be on super profits. And that's particular to the oil and gas industry because they make super profits because they're selling our resource and suddenly the global price goes up. They make enormous windfall profits, and the idea is that Australians should get a bit of a share of those super profits. But it turns out that the gas export industry doesn't pay petroleum resource rent tax at all.
Either. So Australians are getting dudded twice over, essentially.
Absolutely. One way I would describe it, Ebony, is if you wanted to sell your house and you went to an agent and asked the agent to sell your house, and you on condition that they would try and get, well, the agent's job would be to try and get the best price they can for you, but instead the agent just gave your house to their mate for free, right? You'd be outraged. Well, that is exactly what is happening to Australians. Our government that's managing the resource on our behalf is giving it away to a handful of multinational oil and gas companies for free. It's an absolute scandal.
Yeah, and it's on top of that, it's while they're raking in absolutely massive super profits through, they're not extra productive. They're not, working extra hard to do this. It's just because Russia invaded Ukraine and we're coming out of a global pandemic. And as you said.
Another way to describe it is that they're selling the same amount of gas to the same people for, 10 times the price.
But Australia's not capturing any more value out of that.
No. or not very much.
Yeah. And Mark, you're speaking with us from Western Australia this week, where you have been doing a lot of work and talking about the particularly raw deal that taxpayers in Western Australia have been getting. What does your research show there?
Well, in Western Australia, so if Western Australia was a country, it would be the third largest exporter of liquefied natural gas in the world. But of course, the gas isn't exported by Western Australians. It's exported by a handful of mostly foreign-owned multinational gas companies. But you would think that Western Australia would be doing really well out of this. But royalties from the gas industry, because there's a small amount of royalties being paid from some of the offshore gas, royalties for the gas industry make up about 1.3% of the Western Australian government revenue. That's about half of what Western Australian motorists pay in registration. And that's expected to fall over the next 4 years to about 0.6% of government revenue, about 1/6 of what Western Australian motorists will be paying in car rego.
I mean, I just find that both shocking and unbelievable, Mark, that, you know, we keep getting sold this lie all the time about how the gas industry is paying for this and it's paying for that and it's a huge contributor. But motorists, WA motorists, all the drivers in WA are contributing more to the budget bottom line than gas companies, much more.
Yeah, collectively, yes, absolutely.
So, Mark, you've kind of already touched on this a little bit, but how did we find ourselves in this situation? How did it come to this?
Yeah, governments in Australia seem to forget that their job is to represent the Australian public and get the best deal possible for the sale of our gas resources, but instead they're largely giving the resources away. And part of the problem appears to be that a lot of politicians are just too close to the gas industry. And one of the indications of that is that some really prominent politicians like resources ministers, treasurers, etc., have been working in central roles managing the gas industry, and then immediately after they've left office have walked into plum jobs in the gas industry. And I think that is very open to perceptions of a conflict of interest, and I think that should be, that just shouldn't be allowed. And it's not just ministers leaving their jobs and getting jobs in the gas industry. There's a revolving door within the bureaucracy and ministerial offices of gas executives walking in and out of the gas industry and government offices. And that's enormously problematic for Australia's democracy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big issue across a number of industries, that revolving door between lobbyists and the parliament. But here, just with so much money involved, it's really concerning that there is such a close relationship between government and industry here. And Mark, how difficult would it be for the government to fix this, for it to make some different decisions and start, do we have to just keep giving our gas away for free, is my question.
No, it's very, very simple to change. The Commonwealth government has jurisdiction over the gas. It manages our gas. It can start selling it to these companies rather than giving it away. And Australia could make billions of dollars more every year that we could spend on all of the things we need, like health and education and social services and renewable energy, etc. I mean, in reality, part of the problem is they're scared of the gas industry, because the gas industry will try and run a scare campaign similar to what they did with the mining tax. And they basically bully governments into inaction.
Energy rebates, rego freezes, fare caps now, the state's swimming in debt. How are you affording all of this?
Most of this is paid for with those progressive coal royalties. So we took the difficult decision to increase coal royalties on coal super profits. Of course they want to pay less taxes. I don't begrudge them for that. Everyone does. But I am determined to make sure they pay their fair share of royalties to Queenslanders. At the end of the day, we own that coal and we sell that to them. The price we sell that to them is our coal royalties, and they cannot be dug up twice.
I guess the lesson here is perhaps to just stand up to them. I think in Queensland we saw the Queensland government increase its royalties on the coal industry there and saw a big campaign and backlash from the coal industry against them. But the reality is there's more money coming in for Queensland taxpayers, more revenue at least, and they're still getting investment in coal up there. That's not been a problem in Queensland. And indeed, the Premier, Stephen Miles, I think, has been basically saying, well, you know, the Queensland Resources Council can have a whinge all they like. I'm getting a better deal for Queenslanders and I'm not going to stop. I mean, perhaps they should be looking to Queensland for a bit of inspiration.
Look, the gas industry obviously have a lot of power because the government does exactly what they want. But in the case of, say, when you look at other parts of the resource industry, the iron ore industry, for instance, pays a huge amount of royalties and employs a lot of people. So that has real power that's based on what it actually provides. The gas industry doesn't. It employs virtually no one and gets the gas for free and pays virtually no tax. So their power is based on spin, and they have to continue spinning that. And that's hard for them to maintain. So they're a bit like the Wizard of Oz. And I think if governments kind of realise that, I think it can actually be a really popular thing for them to do, to be seen to be standing up to big foreign-owned oil and gas companies for Australia's interests rather than the interests of big foreign-owned oil and gas companies.
Yeah, because, you know, with other industries, a multinational, you know, a big company might be able to pull out of Australia and go somewhere else, but they can't pull out our gas and take it with them, can they? No. The gas is where it is.
Yeah, and every time they threaten this all the time, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Other governments don't fall for this. Like they tried it with the Norwegian government. They said they'd pull out. The Norwegian government just told them to shut up and started taxing them an enormous amount. And they stayed put and paid the tax. And now every Norwegian, gets $20,000 a year from the gas industry.
Yeah, well, wouldn't that be nice, if only. And ultimately, Mark, we need to be not investing in gas and opening it up and approving new gas fields. Ultimately, Australia should be getting out of gas. That's what our Paris commitment is. We need to be reducing our own emissions, but we also can't keep exporting the amount of gas that we are. So, we're really heading in the wrong direction.
Australia needs to stop approving new gas projects, period, because these are some of the biggest fossil fuel resources in the world, new fossil fuel resources. And so they're actually making Australia and the world hotter, drier, more fire prone, more flood prone, causing massive problems. So we absolutely need to stop that. While they are still operating, we need to tax them properly and make them pay for the resources that they're using.
If not the damage they're causing.
But we absolutely need to stop it. And I should just say, one project alone, Woodside's Burrup Hub expansion, one project alone will result in more emissions than all of Australia's coal power stations. And
What?
And that project is currently before, or key elements of that project are currently before Tanya Plibersek, Australia's Environment Minister, and Woodside are going to get that gas for free. They will get that gas for free.
Just repeat that. I am gobsmacked. Say that again. First with the emissions. How big is it?
Woodside's Burrup Hub expansion on the Burrup Peninsula in Western Australia will, if it goes ahead, will have more emissions than all of Australia's coal power stations combined. That improves the emissions
all across Australia
when the gas is burnt overseas. So a real climate-destroying project. The irony is that Woodside is justifying that project on the basis that Western Australia needs the gas, which is ridiculous because it's for export and 90% of gas in Western Australia is exported, and they're going to get that gas for free. There will be no royalties charged on that gas.
I mean, that is bonkers.
It's absolutely over the top and terrible.
Well, I think that's all we've got time for. Thanks very much, Mark.
Pleasure.
If you want to see gas companies paying their fair share, you can sign our new petition, and the link for that will be in the episode description. And our theme music is by Jonathan McFeet from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Ebony Bennett. Thanks for listening.